Hi, welcome to Tonkocast. Today's guest is Graham Annable. So Graham and I actually worked at Lucas Game Company around the same time back in the days, and I've known him for close to 20 years now. He is an Oscar-nominated director. He co-directed Box Trolls, and also he's famous for his comic book creation Grickle, one of the most respected and beloved indie comic web comics, and definitely check it out if you haven't. I had a conversation with him because he recently left Laika, the studio that he worked as a story artist and director for a long time, to be independent. So hear his story. Graham, thank you so much for joining Tonkocast. It's really, really incredible to see your career from sidelines. You and I have crossed paths long time ago at Lucas Arts days, and now you have become Oscar-nominated director, and now you took a leap to become an independent filmmaker slash comic artist slash author slash storyteller. How do you describe
a lot of slashing?
Yeah, exactly. How do you describe what you do and who you are? I'm curious from your own standpoint.
There's no. The one thing I will say consistently is there's just never been much of a master plan on my side of things. I feel like I have all career long just kind of followed my nose into the things that I'm interested in doing, and I've been lucky and fortunate enough to have some degree of success in a lot of different little things. And right now I really kind of like where I'm at. I feel like I'm in kind of a sweet spot where I guess I have done enough things for enough years that a lot of folks do know what I do now. And I've been, getting a lot of opportunities to do many, many different things. Yeah, it's funny. I think back to, I went to Sheridan College, Canadian.
That's right.
And even going to Sheridan was kind of a fluke thing. I grew up in a small city, Northern Ontario, called Sault Ste. Marie, and it's kind of right where all the Great Lakes meet. Anyway, it's known for its steel plant and its hockey players, not really known for cartoonists or or the arts in general, really. But I always drew. I always loved comics, cartoon strips. Peanuts, Charles Schultz was always a huge, huge influence on me right from the get-go. So I always kind of drew my own comics as a kid, and I loved film. And so when it came time to be graduating from high school and actually really figure out what I might do, in my mind, it was like, wow, well, comics plus film equals animation. So I submitted a portfolio to Sheridan, got in, but I didn't know a damn thing about the actual process of animation when I started there. And it was quite an education for the 3 years I was there. And so I started a career as an animator, and I was working in TV and film in the Toronto area for the first couple of years, and it was going pretty good. But in Toronto, the freelance life is kind of a feast or famine. It's like either everybody in the city's working on too many projects, or there's no projects and nobody's working, and there's months on end where you're just counting your change to take the bus. And so at a certain point, I decided I was going to go to Vancouver, BC, because there was more work out there. And right around that time, I should back up. During my time in Toronto, I got this amazing opportunity. I didn't really recognize it as amazing at the time that it occurred, but I got picked to storyboard on Chuck Jones' theater shorts.
Wow.
And it was like working with like the Warner Brothers characters. Like I did an entire short with Daffy and Porky Pig.
Wow.
Getting abducted by aliens. And I was really just let loose to just do whatever. And it was really cool. And then the coolest part of it was I did this all in Toronto at home. But when the short 7-minute short was completely boarded out, we were then all a bunch of different artists who were all doing other shorts. We were all flown to LA. And we got to spend a week pretty much with Chuck Jones. This is in the early 90s. And sit through and have him have story sessions with Chuck Jones, kind of picking apart our shorts and telling us what to change and what to improve. And anyway, it was an amazing, amazing experience. And I left it thinking like, wow, storyboarding, that is what I want to do in animation. But right at that time, I ended up, instead of moving to Vancouver, I got the job at LucasArts.
That's right.
And suddenly found myself spending about 12 years animating in video games instead of storyboarding. but I always knew I wanted to get back to that. And during my time at LucasArts, when I first started there, we were doing there's still a lot of the adventure games, the classic adventure games that they were known for. So we were still doing a lot of hand drawing and scanning in drawings and pretty much doing things traditionally.
That's right.
For 2D. But at a certain point, of course, in the games industry, everything, late 90s turned to 3D. And so started animating with 3D software and CG stuff. And I didn't think I was going to like it, but I actually kind of did enjoy it. I found that, wow, animation's actually just as satisfying, whether you're drawing it with a pencil or whether you're actually manipulating, a CG puppet. It's all very satisfying. When something comes to life, it comes to life, and you still like it. So I stuck around LucasArts, but I found myself really missing drawing every day. I really needed something to kind of keep drawing. I got into animation because I like to draw. So I started doing comics. I sort of reverted back to what I always knew, which was creating my own little comics. And so I started making my own little short stories. And those got picked up by an small little independent company called Alternative Comics. And they started publishing them, and so it sort of became my side gig. I would work during the day at LucasArts, and then I would go home and work on comics at night. Pretty great. But in back of all of that, I always knew I wanted to get back to film at some point. It was actually the comic book work that I'd done that pretty much served as my portfolio to get the job at Leica up here in Portland, Oregon, to work on Coraline, because Henry Selick was trying to assemble a crew of story artists, and it was the comic stuff that kind of sold him on the idea that I could probably manage doing boards for a feature film. So
that's amazing.
It's kind of funny how it all just circled around. Again, it wasn't really like a big plan I had of like, this will get me to that, and that will get me to this, and it's just been kind of following my nose as I go.
That's very much like what a lot of our listeners who are either aspiring artists or they are in the animation industry, but they're trying to kind of get a gig at the feature film productions or a big production that they want to work on. And in a way, your career is so interesting because when I met you for the first time at Lucas, I think you were already a lead animator and you were already working in 3D. But I also knew that, you were already working on the side comics. And I don't know if it was the Grickle that was first or the Hickey comic that you were doing with Scottsy and, Nathan Stapley and those guys.
Grickle came first because I'd been doing that on my own. And then when it got picked up, because originally, before it got published, I was self-publishing. Now, I'd spend nights at home folding paper and stapling them and making the little booklets, because I'd found that there's a great comic shop in Berkeley. I think it's still there, Comic Relief. In that comic shop, I noticed that they had this rack in the back that was all just self-published comics. And so I asked the owner, I was like, is it cool? Could I bring in some of my comics and would you possibly sell them here? And he was like, sure. So I started selling them at that Berkeley shop, which is what led eventually to them getting seen by a publisher and picked up. Anyway, so I had some success, and the Grickle comic got published. And that's when I realized that I'd gotten to know Scott Campbell and Nathan Stapley and Ian Barry and Dave Bogan and a bunch of other artists, all at Lucas. And I was like, I think, I would love to try to make like a humor mag, because I think already had gotten into the habit of just spending like Sunday afternoons a lot of times together in San Francisco. We'd pick a cafe, we'd go there, and we'd basically just do what we used to call them jam comics. I don't know if that's the term the kids use nowadays, but basically, you draw one panel, pass it to the next person, they draw the next panel, and we would do like little 4 to 6 page comic ideas in one thing, and every person would have done every panel would have been done by a different person, and we would kind of pee ourselves laughing at how funny we thought we all were. But that led to the idea of like, wow, I wonder if I think other people would get into this, and so I approached the publisher I had for Grickle and said, would you be interested if I did like a group kind of humor book? And he was game for it, and that's kind of how Hickey formed. And it was really fun. I mean, I was really getting into Harvey Kurtzman. I don't know how familiar with him. Yeah, Mad Magazine, and reading a lot about his life and his thing. And not that I'm Harvey Kurtzman, but I loved the idea that the stuff I would read about him and how he'd sort of corral all these incredible artists together, create these humor mags. I just kind of wanted to emulate that on my own small scale, I guess. And everybody else was up for it. And it was a lot of fun. I think, we did it. Gosh, we must have lasted almost a decade of doing it, or 6-7 years at least.
Oh, that long, huh?
Yeah, just, sporadic outpourings of it. And it was fun. It wasn't just the comics. It translated into, like, we had hickey art shows and stuff. I just it felt cool. I look fondly back on those days of our own little weird humor art movement.
Totally. It was such a credible movement you guys created in the community, and everybody was so crazy about you guys. And it's this, kind of like underground force of artists, getting together, doing some, and, the type of sensibility of humor that you guys brought are very unique and different, but you guys have a similar sensibilities. And I mean, Scott C is very successful with his own art, and
yeah,
I just feel like he, because he worked at Lucas Learning where I belonged, and but then I felt like his heart was in the, the movement you guys are started with Hickey, and in a way, his incredibly successful career now comes from that movement.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to presume to take the risk, yeah, it's because I made Hickey that Scott is what he is, but I do feel like, for all of us, we all kind of learned different things about ourselves in terms of what we liked and the process of how we created the comic strips and the comic stuff that we did. And yeah, with humor, it's like, well, I guess with all art, you're constantly honing your own voice within it and finding what it is that is you within it. And I felt like Hickey provided a pretty nice pathway for a lot of us to kind of go down deeper into ourselves of what worked for us and what things we did like to gravitate to. And yeah, I definitely feel like Scott found a lot of elements that certainly still resonate today for where he's gone to.
Totally. And I think it's such a great message to everybody, not just young people, but even to ourselves, that at the end of the day, as you said it perfectly, it is your voice that actually gets you to where you want to be. And it happened to Scott, it happened to you, and I am so inspired to hear that the success of your career, of course, comes from a combination of your incredibly successful career, even in the day jobs at LucasArts, and you made the game with Telltale Games, and there are a lot of amazing stuff you've done. But at the end of the day, it was your passion project. And eventually you become a director of a major Hollywood feature film, which got you nominated for a Best Animated Feature.
Yeah, it's yeah, I mean, that's the way it should be. I would hope for everybody, hopefully it's your passion that's driving where you're going and where you end up, because that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's the whole point of doing art. You've got to be enjoying it. I mean, we all work in the commercial art world, and we know that there are certain parameters and requirements for different projects and different things, but it's the ability to find what you do and your voice within those things. I think that's always the most essential thing, to producing art that you truly enjoy and truly feel good about at the end of the day.
That's incredible. I'd love to hear a little bit about your transition, even though you got picked up for your incredible comic, or a transition from doing a comic or being an animator to a story artist that eventually leads to directing a major blockbuster film.
Again, the biggest reason I was able to sort of navigate from the world of games back into the world of film and back into doing storyboarding was really the bridge to it was the comics that I'd kept doing, because there's a lot of pretty obvious overlap with constructing a comic book with panels and when you construct storyboards for a film, a lot of similarities. I mean, there's certainly differences for each medium, but a lot of the same rules apply. And the Grickle comics that I had done before I landed that job on Coraline, I was certainly told numerous times from friends, a lot of friends working at Pixar actually, were like, your comics feel animated. It's like, just, I guess, the way I stage things. And, I certainly, that was my background. I'd learned at Sheridan College. I'd learned how to, the language I developed was certainly developed in the world of animation. So it made sense that would then get applied to the way I created comics. So yeah, it kind of allowed me to create this, without even knowing it, I guess, a storyboard portfolio that worked well enough for Henry to say, yeah, let's bring this guy on. Comics kind of worked as that bridge.
And how did that work? I mean, obviously Leica is a very special place, even,
Mm.
unique compared to some of the other major studios like Pixar, DreamWorks, and Disney. But still, like, transitioning from comic to like working with someone like Henry, and eventually, storyboarding for such a big motion picture with a team of other artists. How did that work? And in terms of challenges that you faced working at Leica, can you talk a little bit about challenges that you have to overcome to become a storyboard artist? And eventually you became a director. That means, I assume, they trusted you, they loved your work. So, how did you manage that?
It's interesting, again, where I'm at now, and sort of having the ability to do numerous projects in numerous mediums. It's a lot of the things that I learned creating comics, like I said, applied to story. But one thing I've definitely enjoyed in a way is the sort of having my cake and to eat it too, because when I work in comics, one of the things I really truly love about the medium of comics is it is really just me. I'm writing it, I'm drawing it, I'm doing the lettering, I'm doing every aspect of what the reader, the audience is going to take in. And I like that level of control.
Mhm.
That's something that's always kept me back working in the animation industry. Is that I love my solo stuff in comics, but
Mhm.
there's no denying there's such a sense of reward and camaraderie of working as a huge team and
Mhm.
making something far larger than any of us. Like
Right.
for all the comic projects I've done, I always feel like I can put my hands around it. Like I can
Mhm.
get my arms all the way around. I can feel its size. I can understand it. When I was directing the Box Trolls, that was one of the scariest aspects as far as being a film director that I hadn't anticipated, was like there is no end in sight for a good chunk of the time you're working on it. It doesn't
Mhm.
feel like you fully can grasp the whole concept. You're kind of evolving it day by day with a massive team of people who are trusting that you are going to make the right choices and make everybody look good at the end of it. And you just don't know. There's no way to know.
Mhm.
And that was terrifying. But when it does finish and everything, again, it's that sense of teamwork and the fact that, yeah, we all came together to build this really big thing that
Mhm.
none of us individually could ever have done. Kind of great. So
Mhm.
I've really enjoyed having the ability so far in my career to be able to hop from team projects to solo projects and back and forth, because
Mhm.
both of them are equally important for different things.
Mm. You have such a distinct voice with your work. I mean, Grickle is kind of like what represents, Graham Annable to me, and you've done quite a long time of the Grickle channel. So it's not just a comic, but you actually turned that into a YouTube channel for, I believe it's like a 12, 13 years you've been doing.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It sort of dawned on me the other day that, yeah, I think, well, I started it when I was working on Coraline. I started
Mm.
storyboarding on Coraline, and there was a point in production where Henry Selick had decided that he wanted the story artists to actually cut their own sequences together before we handed it off to edit, which
Mm.
created a huge amount of extra work for all the story artists. And it wasn't super, didn't make the editors feel great, but it was, Henry, had gotten tired, I guess. There'd been a series of like the storyboard artist pitching the sequence to him on paper and everything working and everything's great, and the timing and the gags super. So that would get sent down to edit, but of course the poor editor a lot of times wasn't sitting in on the pitch, so
Mm.
he would have to reinterpret those images, and of course it would come out a little different. And so anyway, there was some loss in translation as it would go through the departments. Anyway, so Henry had all of the story artists learning how to use iMovie at the time. iMovie at that time, back in 2007, there was a version of it that was actually kind of amazing. It was sort of like Adobe Premiere for toddlers,
Mm.
because it was like there wasn't that many buttons to it, and the buttons that were there were perfectly suited to quickly putting together an animated short. I'm terrible at manuals. I can't sit through and read through stuff. I have to sort of, I need to have something motivating me to sort of figure out a program.
Mhm.
And so I just started coming up with little cartoon short ideas and creating them in iMovie. And then that was right around the time YouTube was really beginning to take off. And I thought, whoa, there's no middleman here at all. I can just make a movie and people could see it. And so I just started getting in the habit of anytime I'd get a little idea down, I would just jot it down, board it out quick, and then in my off hours, try to create whatever I could. And that eventually became the channel, the Grickle channel. And it's been a hard habit to stop ever since.
Yeah, incredible how you have created such a cult following, but you kind of kept going. And what's really interesting to me is that you created a Patreon page to get the support. And that's something like all of us independent filmmakers or the studios and individuals, how you are getting that sort of community support that you deserve, but then, monetizing it differently from making YouTube ads and stuff. And you made a choice to go with the Patreon. What was the a choice to go with the Patreon compared to, I don't know, like what other ways? Like, you have such a volume of work that I was wondering, like, if you ever thought about actually packaging it and selling it to a distributor, or I don't know, like what was
again, the whole no master plan thing bites me a lot of times. Like, yeah, I don't know how. I've had many conversations with other folks and myself trying to figure out like I've sort of built this mound of cartoons, and what do I do with this? But Patreon a few years ago seemed like the most sensible way for where I was at, because like you said, through the YouTube channel, I'd certainly built up a bit of a following, and I thought seeing some other creators that seemed to be having success sort of getting, just the way Patreon was set up seemed to make the most sense for what I'd done and how I wanted to continue doing it. Because, with all things, if you keep doing something and refining it, of course you get a little fancier and a little slicker with things. And, not that I don't think any of my cartoons will ever be described as slick or fancy, but yeah, I was starting to purchase a lot of sound effects and music library things, trying to get a better microphone. And there were beginning to have costs attributed to the previously fast and loose Grickle channel was now becoming something that I was actually putting money into. And certainly, as the older my career has gotten, the more tricky it is to find time and to justify taking time to do the things that, on the Grickle channel I wanted to do. So yeah, Patreon made the most sense. And it's been pretty great because it's given me a bit of, just helps justify me spending the time I do spend on the Grickle channel now. And in a lot of ways, I feel like because I know that support is kind of there, it's given me the opportunity to kind of dive into some deeper ideas on some stuff. And creatively, it's let me just keep doing whatever I'm going to be doing, which, I definitely forewarn folks whenever they back me on Patreon that, I'm going to just keep doing what I've been doing. And so there's no guarantees of like a release schedule or whatever. Right. I just chip away at the projects I can. And when I get to them, I get to them.
Is there a plan? And I want to kind of get to like what's next for you. But then just since we're on Grickle channel or even Grickle itself, do you have a plan to kind of push that into something more, or are you going to continue doing Grickle channel on the side? I mean, side is such a strange word at this point because you've been doing it as a main thing for over the years,
Yeah, it's kind of in the front now, but it's just on everything. Yeah, I still don't, I can't say I still have, I still at this point don't have a necessarily clear 5-year plan or anything for Grickle. Because one of the things that's been so great about it for me personally is just it has provided a really nice creative outlet. I mean, I know I'm working in the creative field and I'm creating stuff all the time, but again, that thing about honing your own voice and being able to sort of follow your instincts or intuition on things. Again, been lucky to I've worked on a lot of great projects and things, but I don't know if I could say any other project I've ever worked on gives me the sort of no compromises, free to do whatever I'm going to do like the Grickle channel has. And again, it wasn't like a plan to do it, but the more you continue to do things, you start to realize the patterns in there and the voice you find within it. And I kind of want to do whatever I can as an artist to preserve that space for me and keep it sort of fresh feeling like that. So yeah, I've been really hesitant to sort of pin down an exact plan for it. I will say that now that it's been 12, 15 years into it, and people, certainly a decent chunk of folks are aware of it, I've been getting opportunities now in the last year or two where I've done presentations and shown the films to a live audience. As much as I've loved the internet and YouTube and Patreon and everything for showing it, and I love getting comments and I like getting the likes like everybody else does, there is nothing that beats a live audience watching stuff and the reactions and just feeling the reactions and the vibe that a film creates within a theater setting.
Absolutely. I really look forward to the development of Grickle, but in an organic way and personal way that is, like you said, it's preserved as a, Graham Annable signature. I want to talk about Peter and Ernesto because it's one of my favorite books of yours and I just really love it. And I think if I understand correctly, you are continuing that series as a graphic novel. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I just finished the third book in the series few weeks ago, so I just got the
congratulations
proofs. Thank you. The proofs in the mail just the other day, and yeah, I'm so stoked for this third one to come out, which will be out in April next year. Yeah, Peter and Ernesto is a graphic novel for early readers. Again, because I've been doing stuff on the side or wherever in comics, because I've been doing the Grickle comics. But one of the other things that happened in me doing the Grickle comics was, of course, I went to comic conventions and I met folks in the comic industry. And at a certain point, I got lucky enough to do SpongeBob comics. There was an editor who worked at Nickelodeon magazine years ago, and I would do spot illustration and gag cartoons for them every now and again. He ended up being the main editor for the SpongeBob comic series, and it was great. SpongeBob was one of the best freelance gigs I've ever had because kind of like the Grickle channel, the SpongeBob thing, I guess because of Steve Hillenburg. Anyway, for the comics, they didn't give us model sheets. They didn't care for us to try to even adapt ourselves to what the standard SpongeBob look was. They wanted indie artists involved in the comics to just do their versions of SpongeBob. I mean, there was a certain level of do's and don'ts, but in general, I got to kind of do my own Grickleized version of SpongeBob for a number of years. But anyway, because of that relationship with Chris Duffy, I also got to contribute to a compilation for First Second, which was a collection of indie artists doing their takes on fairy tales. And I got to do Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and it was just a 5-page story, but it was completely wordless. It was a totally silent comic, and it was super fun. I guess the editors, publishers at First Second really liked it and sort of made it known that if I was ever interested in doing a completely wordless comic for them, they would certainly want to publish it. So that was the beginnings of Peter and Ernesto. I started to sort of rack my brain for what I could do for them, and I began the journey thinking I was going to create a completely wordless book about two sloths. But about 20, 30 pages in, I realized I really would like to have a few words here and there. And that became the perfect thing for early readers, because it wasn't a lot of, word balloons. It wasn't overwhelming for kids. Yeah, it just kind of was this perfect little merger of things that First Second was looking for and kind of just suited my skills, because the books, as much as there are some words, they remain pretty visual for a lot of the storytelling.
That's incredible. And, in a way, Peter and Ernesto is one of the opportunities that I got interested in. Just, hey, Grickle, I've been such a huge fan, but just to see you do that sort of early readers book kind of got me excited about, hey, we work with Graham, at Tonkocast, and then you kind of let us know the news that you left Leica to be independent. If you could kind of close this interview with your ambition and your decision to leave a big studio environment and then just to become you working on your thing full time.
I've completely enjoyed my time at Leica. And like you were saying earlier, Dice, I mean, it is truly a unique studio and place. And the world of stop motion is something I'd honestly, before working on Coreland, I'd never aspired to anything stop motion related or anything, and I didn't quite understand what I was walking into. But when those first sets were built on Coreland and I saw the actual puppets, and it all became very clear why there are so many people obsessed with this form of animation. It really is unique. It's just nothing quite like it. So yeah, in Leica, just so many opportunities that I had there. It was great. But like with all things, for all the numerous other projects I've been doing, and it just kind of naturally evolved to a point where, for me, career-wise, I just realized I wanted to and I could. I was in a position to freely step out of those walls and begin to sort of more directly pursue the things that were interesting to me. Yeah, it was funny. It just sort of took a long, slow realization of me hitting that point of like, wait a minute, I don't have to do the 9 to 5 commute necessarily. I could stay home and just draw the comics I wanted to draw. But it took a long time to get here, and it took me a long time to realize that I was in that position. So yeah, those are sort of the biggest factors in me sort of stepping out and becoming more independent.
That's right. Well, huge congratulations. And I think
Thanks.
all of us are always inspired by people who have the courage to, especially at the stage of your career and you have a family and house and everything, you settle down, but then you still kind of decided to take a new big challenge. And, I'm sure there are a lot of things that are not obvious or known in the future, but you're getting into this world of unknown. I really respect you for that.
Well, thanks. Yeah.
Is there any big thing that, besides Peter and Ernesto, third book you just finished, and is there any other things that you are doing that you can talk about?
Well, there's plenty of things I probably can't talk about, but one of the things that I guess maybe it hasn't been officially announced, but I feel like it's safe to say, I've been working hard, gosh, for the last year and a half, maybe 2 years now, on a 300+ page graphic novel for middle school aged kids, and it's a horror novel, which horror movies and horror, I blame Stephen King. I've read so much Stephen King when I was like 12, 13 years of age. It's had a lasting impression, so I've always wanted to do something in that genre, and so I'm really excited because it's getting closer to completion, and hopefully within the next year or so it'll be announced, I'm sure. But I've been working hard and consistently on that. That's one of the bigger projects for me.
You said that's a graphic novel?
Yeah, graphic novel. Sorry, yeah.
Wow, that's I can't wait. I mean, your sensibility of darkness with the quirky kind of characters, I can't wait. That's gonna be so amazing. Graham, thank you so much for your time. You gave us so much in such a short amount of time, and I really appreciate it. And best of luck with your venture, and I really, really hope that Tonkocast get to work with you.
Yeah, me too.
Someday soon. You're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Dice. Appreciate it.